Hey, it's me, Nalthazar, and welcome to another Magic the Gathering Puzzle Quest video. In today's video, I'm going to be going over the masterpieces that caught my eye from Strixhaven. So, let's get into it. Now, before we go over all of the masterpieces that I have compiled here, there are a few little bits of information that you should know. The first is that any of the cards that have Invoke, I'm going to be displaying both sides. So, for example, we have Ardenn here, and so I've got both Ardenn and Krark, regardless of whether or not the other side is a card that I am personally targeting, just because with the way that Invoke works, it means that you've got this other card at your disposal, and so at the very least, to showcase the flexibility of the cards, you will be seeing both of them. Secondly, in terms of the power of Strixhaven, Strixhaven's superpower cards are not from the masterpiece realm. While there is a masterpiece, or I suppose there are a few masterpieces that I think are quite strong, none of them are cards that have strength like, say, Blue Sun Zenith or Omniscience or Urza or things like that. So none of them are cards that I think are going to make or break standard. However, I do think that there are going to be a number of them that you'll want to have just because they're strong cards. So keep that in mind as I go over this list. Now, let's get into the cards themselves. That's what we're here for. The first one is Ardenn, Intrepid Archaeologist. So this is going to be 14 mana for a 4/4. It has the rally or whatever that little banner thing is that makes it so that when this creature attacks, it becomes the first creature in your little assembly of up to 3 creatures. It's going to have Legendary and it has Invoke. So with this one's Invoke, if you choose to invoke it, you're going to get Krark the Thumbless. Otherwise, if you just cast it for Ardenn, then you get all of these super sweet abilities. The first of which is when you activate a loyalty ability, pick one of the first 3 different aura and or equipment cards from your library. Fetch that card, it gains full mana, then destroy the others. If not invoked, when this creature attacks, if the first card in your graveyard is an aura, copy it into your hand with half of its mana. If that card is an equipment card, move it into play under your control. Now there's a bunch of really cool things that you can do with Ardenn. We happen to have quite a lot of very powerful aura cards in standard right now. Things like Chromanticore or Staggering Insight come to mind pretty immediately as very strong white auras. However, there are strong auras in other colors also, and you don't have to play this in a mono white deck. Furthermore, when you activate a loyalty ability, you're going to pick one of those first 3 different auras or equipments from your library. So if you play with a spammy planeswalker, say something like Karn, that is going to be able to use the first ability for just 4 loyalty, you're going to be getting a heck of a lot of aura or equipment cards and giving them full mana, which is super sweet. You're going to be buffing your creatures quite a lot. Now, in terms of equipment, we've got quite a lot of very powerful equipment cards in Standard. Some of the ones that come to mind immediately for me are things like Embercleave and Shadow Spear, as those are 2 equipment cards that make their way into a lot of my decks. And so just being able to freely pull any of those cards and then cast them for free is going to be fantastic. And if that wasn't enough, if you don't invoke this thing, then when it attacks, the first card in your graveyard, if it's an aura, you're going to copy it into your hand and give it half of its mana. If it's an equipment, you're going to move it directly to play under your control. And since when you activate a loyalty ability, you're picking one of the first 3 different aura or equipment and then dumping the ones that you don't choose into your graveyard's probably going to have some auras and equipment for you to be able to bring back. Now, it does specify that the first card in your graveyard has to be the aura, or the first card in your graveyard has to be the equipment. So if you start loading up your graveyard with spells, or if creatures die or something like that, before you start dumping things into your graveyard, then you probably aren't going to be able to get anything from the when this creature attacks portion of the ability. Now, because the way that it reads, if there's an aura, copy it into your hand. My guess is that the aura just stays as the first card in your graveyard, and then every single turn you're going to be attacking with this thing and getting a copy of that aura with half of its mana. So you're definitely going to be able to do some really wacky things with Ardenn. I think that Ardenn is definitely a card that you'll be happy about pulling if you get him. However, it's not a card like Urza where it's like you have to get this card, you know? So the flip side of Ardenn, the invoke side, is going to be Krark the Thumbless. I absolutely love Krark's Thumb in Paper Magic. It just, like, the idea of it just cracks me up. So seeing Krark the Thumbless here is good fun. And it's a goblin on top of that. So, you know, why not? So this is a 13 mana creature. It's a 4/4. It is legendary and has invoke. And when you cast your first non-copy spell each turn, copy that card. If there are 9 or more red gems, deal damage to your opponent's planeswalker equal to that copy's base cost. If there are 9 or more blue gems, that copy gains full mana. And if this thing is not invoked, then when you cast a spell card that is a copy, your creatures get a +3/+3 buff until end of turn. Now this is a card that immediately stands out to me as the type of card that would go really well with some of the red spell decks that we're going to be seeing. Jaya is going to be an excellent option. The new Jeska Thrice, whatever the name of that planeswalker is going to be another one that I think could be a really fun option with Krark. Other cards like Double Vision and Fiery Emancipation are probably going to be able to do some pretty wacky things with this card because you're just going to get so many spell copies, and then between Fiery Emancipation burning your opponent and then this thing burning your opponent and then getting like triple damage from Fiery Emancipation being down whenever it attacks because it's a creature, you're going to be killing your opponents really, really fast. I see this as a card that will be really fun in the training grounds. Depending on how quickly it kills your opponent, it might not be a card that you would use much outside of the training grounds, but I love that both sides of this particular invoke card are very good. Both Ardenn and Krark seem like cards that I will want to play with and test out and do some pretty silly shenanigan-y things with. So neither of them are cards that I feel like, oh my gosh, you have to have, but nonetheless, they're both very strong-looking cards. The third card on my list is Arixmethes' Slumbering Isle. Now, this is one of the two masterpieces that I think is going to be one of the strongest ones from Strixhaven. So let's do a quick dive, right? This is going to be a 12 mana support. It has Resilient, so when you match this gem, or actually when anyone matches this gem or is hit by a landfall, it loses a shield and then regains that shield. Now, this thing has 4 shields. It starts with 4 shields, so you're not going to really have to worry about this thing getting matched and blowing up. And when this support loses shield for the first time each turn, you reinforce it. So not only is it going to get the shield back, but then you're going to go ahead and reinforce a thing, which is going to go from 4 to 8, 8 to 12, 12 to 16, and so on and so forth. This thing is going to be getting shields very quickly. As long as this support is reinforced 4 or more times, your first creature gets +12/+12 and gains Defender. Like, that second ability is just like, what? Really? Because then, like, if you pair this thing with, say, like, Thopter Spy Network, right, which is going to be making those 1/1 Thopter tokens, so it's going to give you a 4/4 Thopter token with flying every single turn, then that Thopter token is just going to guaranteed be a 16/16 flying defender. And if your opponent kills the thing, then the next turn you're just going to get a brand new 16/16 flying defender down. So this thing, in conjunction with something that's going to be making tokens every turn, is going to be an absolute nightmare to deal with because it's a land, and we really don't have a whole lot of support removal that gets rid of lands. So if you've got something that's going to consistently make creatures every turn, then those creatures are going to turn into Madhouse Behemoths. Nissa Worldwaker is, I think, the planeswalker that is going to be benefiting the most from Strixhaven coming out. She's going back into like the god tier of planeswalkers, I think, based on the cards that are in Strixhaven. And this is one of those cards that you put into Nissa and then you just do horribly dirty things to your opponent. Because every time you activate that first ability, you're going to be converting a whole bunch of gems. This thing's going to be converting a whole bunch of gems. Those elemental tokens are going to be able to get Defender. And so you're just going to find that you're going to steamroll over your opponents because of nonsense like this. And then if it didn't have, you know, just that second ability, it has a third ability too, which is at the beginning of your turn, convert 4 gems to blue and 4 gems to green. So you're going to get a whole bunch of gem conversion out of this. You're going to be buffing your creatures and giving them Defender. And this thing's going to get a super shield boost, which is going to help you with shield cards. And, oh yeah, this is a land. So because this thing's a land, let's say that you play this with, I don't know, Avatar of Growth, and this is your only land in your deck, then Avatar of Growth is going to get you 2 of these. It's going to be really easy to get this thing reinforced 4 or more times. Like, really, really easy. If you have a big collection. If you don't have a big collection, it's going to be a little bit harder, but we have so much land fetch. I mean, even just within Strixhaven, that it's going to be really easy for you to get this thing out and make it scary. So this is a card that I do think you will want to target. It's a card you are going to want in your collection. It is one of the, if not the most powerful masterpiece that stands out to me for the set. Next up is Breeches Brazen Plunderer. So this is an 11 mana 5/5 goblin pirate. I love the idea of goblin pirates. I just don't think that goblins, I mean, they're just so suicidal. I don't know that they'd make good pirates, but whatever. I know they existed in Ixalan, but whatever. So this thing is going to be legendary. It has Menace and it has Invoke. So the one side we get Breeches and the other side we get Malcolm. So Breeches, apart from being a 5/5 goblin pirate, is going to have the following abilities. When this creature deals combat damage to your opponent's planeswalker, move the top 2 cards of each player's library into your graveyard, then pick one of the first 4 cards from your graveyard. Fetch that card, exile the others, that card gains half of its mana. If you don't invoke this thing, when this thing attacks, it gains double strike until end of turn. So if you don't invoke the thing, it's going to be hitting twice, and because its ability makes it so that when it deals combat damage, you're going to be moving cards from each player's library to your graveyard, it's going to make it so that you get to do that twice. And what I really like about this is, you know fairly well that in general I don't like playing with my opponent's cards, but what I do like is that this gives you half of the cards from your side, half the cards from your opponent's side. So in the event that your opponent is actually playing cards that you want, you can steal them. And if they're not playing cards that you want, then just take your own and give them half mana. So this is a red creature that's going to be giving you quite a lot of card draw, just because, well, you know, fetch, but, you know, fetch, draw, potato, in red, really. It's not like this is Jace Unraveler of Secrets. So this thing is going to be, I think, a really strong card. I don't think it's one of those must-haves, once again, but I do really think that this is going to be a very good card for you to have in your collection. If you're a newer player to the game, or you're in one of the lower tiers, like bronze, silver, or gold, and you somehow manage to luck into this card at only 11 mana is just going to be an absolute beast for you. It's a very good card. The flip side of Breeches is Malcolm, Keen-Eyed Navigator. Now, Malcolm in the middle over here is going to be 10 mana. It's a 4/4 with flying and rally, or whatever that banneret thing is again, and also invoke and is legendary. And this one's going to have, when a creature you control deals combat damage to your opponent's planeswalker, create a gold token. If that creature is a pirate, create 2 gold tokens instead. And if this thing is not invoked, when this creature attacks, your creatures all get +X until end of turn, where X is the number of artifact supports you control. Now, this is really fun to me because you're just going to be creating a whole bunch of gold tokens. It kind of feels like a new version of Lannery's Storm, if you remember that card, because it's going to be boosting all of your pirates based on the number of treasures you control. Now, an added thing that I think is kind of cool about Malcolm is that Malcolm actually pairs really well with Breeches, in that this is actually a double-sided card where I would actually periodically want to use the Invoke ability and play with both of them. Because Breeches is a pirate, Malcolm is a pirate. Malcolm's going to make it so that when a pirate you control deals damage to your opponent, you're going to create 2 gold tokens. So Malcolm is going to create 2 tokens. Breeches is going to create, you know, if you give all your creatures double strike, 2 and then now 4, and now this thing's making 4, so you're getting 8 tokens. I don't know. I just see it as an opportunity for you to get a heck of a lot of tokens. And heck, I would even totally play these 2 in a red-blue pirate deck that just didn't invoke either of them but had both of them in the deck, because I think that they are both going to work really well together. So I think they're kind of fun. They're not like absolute must-haves, but they're absolutely strong cards. This brings us to Kamahl, Heart of Krosa. Kamahl is a 22 mana critter with a 7/7 body, is going to have Invoke and Legendary. So the Invoke for this one is going to be Sakashima of 1,000 Faces. That's going to be this one right here. And at the beginning of combat on your turn, your creatures get +3/+3 and gain Trample until end of turn. So every combat, your creatures are getting a boost and they're getting Trample. When a support you control loses shields for the first time each turn, your first other creature gets +X/+X and gains bravery, haste, and vigilance until end of turn. X is going to be equal to that support's shield. Now you see that it has bravery, haste, and vigilance. I'm going to go ahead and appreciate Kamahl for a moment. I've been saying rally, but it's called bravery, that little banner thing. So those of you who are in the comments section already like, my dude, stop calling it rally, it's bravery. I see it now. I see it. We're good. I got you all. So what's cool about this thing is that in getting the bravery, haste, and vigilant, it's when a support you control loses shields for the first time each turn, right? So your first other creature is going to get the boost, and then it's going to get the bravery, haste, vigilance. Now this is important because if your opponent matches or makes you lose a shield, then you're going to give your first other creature a power toughness boost and give it vigilance, which is going to be able to block their stuff and kill their stuff. So, I mean, that's kind of cool. I wouldn't rely on that second ability though, but you know, it's cool to have. And then here's where Kamahl is actually strong, if not invoked. If you invoke Kamahl, like, so if you've played Sakashima and you invoke Sakashima to get Kamahl, so Kamahl is invoked, I would say that you're taking away from a lot of the power of Kamahl, because if not invoked, when this creature attacks, reinforce your first other creature. That's a permanent reinforcement. If you're going to be reinforcing your first other creature every single turn, especially in conjunction with that second ability of Kamahl's, where you're going to be giving that critter bravery, haste, and potentially vigilance, that's really strong. That's a very strong ability. You aren't going to want to get rid of that ability. So, well, things like, you know, Malcolm and Breeches, if you don't have their evoke ability, it's not a big deal. There's other ways of giving Breeches double strike, right? This one is definitely going to be a little bit weaker without it. However, Kamahl, what makes Kamahl good is that reinforcing your first other creature every time it attacks. So this one you don't want to invoke. Sakashima of 1,000 Faces, this is the one that you would have to invoke to get Kamahl anyways, I think. So, I mean, you know. But this one is actually also another really cool card. So this is a 15 mana support. It is a legendary support and has, when you cast this card, create on the battlefield a copy of target creature. So basically, if there's a creature out on the battlefield, either your side or your opponent's side, you have Sakashima come down as a copy of that card. As Sakashima is coming down as a copy of that card, I'm going to guess, although it doesn't state that this is specifically true, that Sakashima is going to maintain the legendary typing, which is important because when this support loses shield for the first time, reinforce your first legendary creature for the first time each turn, right? So if you match it, your opponent matches it, this thing's just going to keep reinforcing, reinforcing, reinforcing. Then, if this thing's not invoked, when you cast another legendary creature or support, reinforce it. This effect can trigger up to 2 times per turn. So this is a thing that I see just being able to reinforce a lot. And there's a lot of really cool stuff in Strixhaven that has to do with reinforcing. Heck, just think of, like, I don't know, having a Gaia's Revenge out, and then all of a sudden you bring Sakashima down and have it become a copy of Gaia, and then just have Gaia reinforce up the wazoo, or Quartzwood Crasher, or, you know, any other particularly nasty creature that comes to your mind. One of the new critters that has big guns or something, I don't know. Anyways, Sakashima seems like a really cool card to me. 15 doesn't seem overcosted for the ability, especially because it can come into play as a copy of one of your opponent's things, and the ability to reinforce a lot is pretty cool. Now, neither Sakashima nor Kamahl are cards that I would want to invoke, because I would want to have the, if not invoked ability for both of these cards, but, you know, you never know. Maybe there will be times when you're like, you know what, I want the other side. This brings us to a non-invoke card. Whew, sigh of relief. They're not all invoked, guys. So this is Mazirek, Kraul Death Priest. This is 16 mana for a 6/6 with flying, and it is legendary. When another creature or support is destroyed, creatures you control get +X/+X permanently. X is 1 plus the number of reinforcements of the destroyed card. So that alone is just going to sort of buff your creatures when another creature's support dies. It doesn't seem like it's going to be something that's going to give you a huge buff, since for the most part, when you're destroying things, if you're playing a relatively decent control deck, you're just destroying things that have 1 reinforcement anyways at the most, usually 0 reinforcements. So I don't see you getting consistent power toughness boosts from this. However, the secondary ability is definitely good. with Morbid, so if a creature died this turn, then at the end of your opponent's turn, your opponent loses life equal to this creature's power. So there's going to be a lot of ways for you to buff Mazirek up. Mazirek has a way of potentially buffing itself up a little bit. There are definitely a lot of ways for you to kill tokens or kill creatures, especially because this thing is also black in its color identity. And so activating the Morbid here, I think, is going to be really easy. Now, this is, I think, on the weaker side of the masterpieces that we've looked at, just at a first glance. However, it could wind up being very strong, which is why it's here. Do I think you absolutely need to target this? No, I don't. However, I do think it will be fun, and it could be a card that you would definitely want to target. So this would pair really well with Liliana from, oh, it's not a Monket, but the Liliana whose first ability is Anoint, where you destroy a creature you control and then it enters the battlefield as a zombie, because that's going to trigger Morbid and it's going to count as a creature being destroyed, so it's going to give you the buff and it's going to trigger the Morbid, which, you know, could be a pretty cool combination. There are really a lot of combinations with that Liliana, honestly. It's Liliana Death's Majesty, by the way. I should say Liliana Death's Majesty. So this brings us to Melek, Izzet Paragon. This is 16 mana for a 6/8. It has Wizardry. So Wizardry is if you play a wizard, or if you cast a wizard or you cast a spell, right? So anytime you cast a wizard or a spell, you're going to get this following effect. So draw a card. If that card is a spell, copy it. That copy gains full mana. Otherwise, exile that card. This effect can trigger up to 3 times per turn. So this is cool for a whole bunch of reasons, right? It can trigger up to 3 times per turn. So if you're doing some kind of wacky nonsense with flash, you could even flash something in on your opponent's turn and have this wizardry effect trigger and give you stuff with full mana. But even without, if, like, let's say that you play a deck that is using this as your only creature, and then a whole bunch of really nasty blue and red spells, then I could see you being able to chain off a whole bunch of really fun nonsense using Melek and those spells and just getting like up to 3 free cards a turn, right? Because if you get the first spell to cast, right, and you get the wizardry and it draws a spell, and then when you copy that and give it full mana, you're going to play it, which is just going to trigger the wizardry again. And then you're going to play it, which is going to trigger the wizardry again. So I see you being able to trigger the wizardry 3 times fairly easily, especially if you're running a very spell-heavy deck. So if you were to run this in, say, like a Rawl deck, I could see you being able to do some pretty wacky things. And if you're running something like Fiery Emancipation in the deck also, then you're going to be able to just sort of lightning blast your opponent to smithereens with this thing. So definitely really cool. Once again, it's not like a standalone. You have to have this card like Urza, but I do think it will be a strong card. This brings us to the last pairing of cards. It's going to be Sengir, the Dark Baron, along with the invoked Slurrk, All-Ingesting. So Sengir, the Dark Baron, is 21 for an 8/8 with flying. It has when a card in play with a creature type is destroyed or loses a reinforcement, this creature gets +3/+3. Now, if you're wondering, why does it say when a card in play with a creature type is destroyed? Why not just say when a creature is destroyed? Well, if we scoot our bums on back to Sakashima, for example, Sakashima is a support that has the human rogue subtyping. So this is an example of a support that has a creature subtyping, which means that if, say, a Sakashima support is destroyed, that will also count toward this effect of Sengir, which is going to buff Sengir. So when a card in play with a creature subtype is destroyed or loses a reinforcement, you give a permanent +3/+3 buff to Sengir. When an opposing creature dies, you gain X life. X is that creature's base toughness. So this is a black creature, and you're probably going to be playing pretty heavy removal in black. So not only is this going to serve as a solid power toughness body that is going to get buffed when you kill things, but it's also going to give you life when you kill things. So this set is very refreshing for absolutely ridiculous black creatures, because black now has some of the nastier creatures that we've seen in quite a while for black. Actually, maybe this is like the golden age of black. Black might be the strongest mono color right now. No, I'm not ashamed to say that. It's very good. So yeah, Sengir of the Dark Baron, or Sengir the Dark Baron, looks really cool. And then finally, if it's not invoked, at the beginning of combat on your turn, you may have this creature gain Berserker until end of turn. So if you wanted just to have like an extra way to kill one of your opponent's creatures to gain some life and buff this thing up even more, you can. So yeah, all around, I see this card being very solid. Which takes us to Slurrk, All-Ingesting. So Slurrk is 16 mana. It's a support. It's an ooze pest, so it's another one of those supports that has a creature subtyping. When this support, it has level, so you'll see over here this little one with a whoop arrow, that's level. So this is actually the only card in the game right now that has level that isn't like a token, like the fractal tokens. So when this support loses shield, increase its level by 2. Then your opponent loses X life. X is equal to this support's level. So this comes into play with 10 shields. So it's got quite a lot of shields that it can lose, which means it's definitely going to be able to level up a bunch of times. And if you just play more copies of it, every reinforcement of this is going to give it 10 more shields, which is a lot. When a card in play with a creature type is destroyed or loses a reinforcement, your buffed creatures get +X+X, then you gain X life. That X is once again going to be equal to this support's level. And finally, if this thing is not invoked, then when this support is destroyed, each opposing creature is going to get -X, where X was Slurrk's level. Now, I don't actually think that Slurrk is going to be very good at all, actually. So, I mean, there's probably going to be some wacky things you can do since this is a green support. You're probably going to be able to put it in like a green gem conversion deck, and then you're going to be able to have it so that, you know, this thing plus Song of Creation plus a bunch of green gem conversion, and now, oh no, your opponent's going to die because every time you get one of those green matches into this thing, your opponent's going to lose ridiculous life because it's going to go from 1 to 3 to 5 to 7, and it's going to boost up pretty quickly. But, I mean, if you're already playing that deck, you might as well be playing with Leafkin Avenger, which is going to be way easier to get than a Masterpiece, but whatever. What do I know? Anywho, that's all of the masterpieces that I have highlighted from Strixhaven. Those are my general thoughts that I have. First impressions, what am I thinking of that you can do with them? I think that they are all really cool. However, this is one of those sets where I don't think that you're going to have to use up all of your pinkies to try and get the masterpieces. I think you're going to want to probably use them to get the mythics. So, that's it. That's all I've got for you. So, thank you so much for watching, and I'll see you in the next one.